And we're going to really anchor it to three key areas, which are authority, authenticity, and trust. And so a lot of times people assume that because of having this high level information, maybe they're a master's of their information set, or they even have a PhD level, that they are going to be immediately taken seriously, immediately thought of as the expert and trusted, no matter how they present the information. So just finding those
Mhm.
human connections, and not just right at the top, but kind of throughout if possible, so that you're constantly reminding them, I'm a human up here and I'm hoping to connect with you. When people feel that you are an authentic human, they're more likely to trust you. One key thing to do is to clarify what your objective is. And so I think a lot of times we think we know our objective when going into something, but really isolating and crystallizing that for yourself. My goal at the end of this conversation, presentation, interaction is to, and then figure out, it's really about what action do you want for them. So often people stop at, I want understanding, or I want, them to have a better awareness. But what we have to realize is lots of people have understanding and awareness about many things that doesn't drive towards action.
So this is a strategy, and we have to be in our minds. But if we have emotions, if the person who we are speaking is, I don't know, our leader, our boss, or an important person, how can we control our emotion and communicate in a way that is efficient without the other person seeing, or maybe seeing, but not so much? I don't know how much of our emotion can we let them see.
Right. I don't think that there's a bright line for that, because once again, knowing your audience, some people have very receptive bosses to emotional interactions. Some people may not. I think, once again, returning to that idea that for so long we've under this adage of business isn't personal, compartmentalized, there shouldn't be emotion at play. One, that's just so ridiculous and such a misunderstanding, and also I think leads to a ton of mental health problems within the business world the more we shove down, compartmentalize, and pretend that that is a reality that is even possible.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Improve Work podcast. Today we'll be speaking about communication skills with Devin Sarno. Devin is a public speaking coach and teacher. She helps individuals develop their presentation and communication skills, as well as improve their credibility, authenticity, and authority. She teaches at the George Washington High School, where she runs a successful speech and debate program. Also, she runs public speaking and communication workshops for companies and coaches individuals to enhance their communication skills. She has an educational background in dramatic arts and she is a theater director. She studied at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in Los Angeles and the British American Dramatic Academy at Oxford University. Welcome, Devin. It's nice to have you here, and I'm excited about our conversation.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to talk about how public speaking and a little bit of theater can improve company culture. Yeah.
For sure. I'm excited how you make connections between theater and public speaking in companies or communication in companies. I think that there are many connections and links between this.
Absolutely. I think so often we like to separate our entertainment forms from our life, and think of them as separate entities. But in reality, art reflects life, reflects art. And when you look at it holistically, there's a lot of things to be learned from different industries on how we can improve company culture and make it better for everybody, top down.
For sure, for sure. Please tell us a little bit more about yourself and about your work, and how did you decide to to be a communication coach?
Sure. So, as you mentioned, I have an educational background in theater. So, that is where all my formal training is officially. And so, I studied both in the States and abroad in the UK. And all of that was super informative in helping me to understand how humans operate within a given context with each other. You know, so much of formal acting training is just about the human condition and how we relate to one another and how we achieve things that we want. Because you're building these characters on stage and you have to figure out why do they do the things they do and how do they get what they want from the other characters in order to create meaningful drama on stage or on camera. Um, but so much of that is very similar when it's done well to real life, because that's the goal, is to create characters that are believable. So all of that kind of cute, like, came together when I became a coach for a competitive high school program about 12 years ago. And I entered that space because of my acting training. And in the States, there is an event that really drives towards narrative storytelling. And so I was brought on because of that. But through the last 12 years, I've really realized how much all of this presentation and public speaking just really relates to how effective we are in the world. And so I've slowly expanded as I've realized that other people didn't have access to this training in their educational background and they need some support. And so I'm excited to offer it.
Yes, it's true. I didn't receive education in communication in high school or in the elementary school, just at the university. So I think that
And
men,
yeah, go ahead.
and also depends of the university or of the faculty you follow, because not any university provide these kinds of education.
So often it's just a basic, entry level speech class so they can check that box off. And then a lot of times I've found that the more specialized you are, the less speech training you're going to get because you're going to need to spend all of your educational
Yes.
time diving into these STEM classes. And so maybe if you head into a business route, maybe you're given a little bit more presentation direction. But the more STEM based you are, the more they're going to focus on all of those high level skills. And the more you're going to be surrounded with people who have a basic understanding of those skills. And so then when you find yourself in the workplace and you need to bridge that gap
Mm-hmm.
between who have that basic understanding and people who don't, you're at a loss because that was not a part of your formal education. And so that's where I come in, is to start to help
Mm-hmm.
people who have all of this amazing knowledge, but they're not quite sure how to communicate it to other people because that just wasn't, there wasn't time for that. I mean, there's only so
Mm-hmm.
much time in an educational system.
And how do you help, let's say, employees who didn't have this education in school? Let's say, I know you work with engineers, for example, and how do you help engineers to become better communicators in the workplace with their colleagues or with their clients, with their collaborators? What are some ways in which they can improve their skills and communicate in an impactful way? And in a way that it's heard, because sometimes our words are lost in when we speak.
I think it's focusing, helping them focus on three main factors. So, coming into a company, I might work one on one with an employee, or I might do a larger group workshop that might take a day, a couple days, depending on what the company's needs are. And we're going to really anchor it to three key areas, which are authority, authenticity, and trust. And so, a lot of times, people assume that because of having this high level information, maybe they're a master's of their information set, or they even have a PhD level, that they are going to be immediately taken seriously, immediately thought of as the expert and trusted, no matter how they present the information, because they've always been that way within their more internal set. I have a PhD. Of course, I know what I'm talking about. Um, but what they have to realize is that we have so many cultural, you know, misgivings or misnomers or just belief systems around people who are highly intelligent, people who are bringing scientific information in. Are they trying to persuade me? Are they trying to confuse me so that I'll do what they want them to do? With the onset of this idea of like all high level information should be mistrusted at its core because of the fact that like so much misinformation is out there because of the internet and different media outlets. We now have a little bit of misgiving with people who are inherently more intelligent than us by title. So giving employees the understanding that yes, by title and by the nature of maybe coming in with this company, they already have that authority because of that's why we hired you. But I still need to have earned your trust and authenticity in order to make sure this information really does what I need it to do. And so a lot of times in those particular situations, we're really talking more about how they can earn an audience's trust and how they can seem authentic so that their authority isn't overridden by these cultural preconceived notions that are starting to become pretty prevalent.
Interesting. How do you help them to communicate in a way that create trust?
That's a great question. So I think that the first thing you can do is actually focus a little bit on authenticity. So at the beginning of presentations, depending on your audience, finding ways to connect with them. So it can be a little bit confusing when you come into professional settings and you think, oh, I've got to be completely formal. I can't let myself show through. I need to be presenting in this way that they think I'm a PhD or a master's or this type of thing. When in reality, letting more of your personality come through, looking for those ways to find human connection is so key in taking you from this unreachable platform and bringing you down where they say, oh, I see myself in you and I know I wouldn't lie to me. I know I wouldn't manipulate me. So I feel more comfortable believing that you aren't either. And so this might be sharing a little bit of your life at the beginning. I'm not looking for like your traumas or your problems, but more so who are you, where are you from, what is a hobby you like, finding maybe you have researched the company a little bit and you know that this person lives in this certain area and you explain or you tell your connection to that area. So just finding those
Mm-hmm.
human connections and not just right at the top, but kind of throughout if possible, so that you're constantly reminding them, I'm a human up here and I'm hoping to connect with you. When people feel that you are an authentic human, they're more likely to trust you. Secondarily, by allowing for time for them to question, because the fastest thing to make us feel like something sketch is going on is by things coming at us at rapid speed with no pauses to check for like clarification and
Mm-hmm.
comprehension. So if I just come at you and I'm trying to prove all of my authority by coming fast, I'm talking in high level terms because I think that makes me sound really smart and official. They may feel like I'm trying to pull a fast one over on them. So taking time for them to be able to say, I don't understand that. I'm not sure about that right there, and not getting defensive. Instead saying things like, that's a really great question. I can see why you might think that. Let's break it down a little further, or something similar. By allowing for them to express their confusion, their maybe skepticism, you will be able to actually build trust, which sometimes is the opposite of what people think. They think if somebody is showcasing those instincts that already they've lost their trust. And in fact, that might be a sign that they have your trust if you can allow for it to happen.
Mm-hmm. Uh, how can uh, how can we be more open in our conversation? Because it's sometimes hard to be open to another person and let them know things about us. And I know that in the engineering field, I think that sometimes they are not so communicative. They are not so open in communication.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, yeah, like not to overgeneralize those who work in the
Yes.
STEM field because this can happen in any area. You step into a business world, and I think this is actually one of the more overarching problems is this idea that business for so long has been separate from private, in this idea that business is not personal, it's just business. We should 100% isolate it into a compartmentalized box. And for years, that's how it's been seen. And those people who have the better skill set at compartmentalization, those are the ones who have risen to the top. And
Mhm.
so I think pushing back first on this idea that that's how business should be run, that business should be this compartmentalized box that's all just data and numbers, and that any human connection between who we are at the core in business is inherently problematic and a sign of inability to operate within the business world is really a terrible thing to keep projecting out in the world. But internally, whether you are in STEM or other fields and you struggle with the idea of what do I share, um, I think it's so audience dependent. And that's going to be, a key thing no matter whether you're internally communicating or externally communicating, business to business, client, business to client. You've got to know your audience. And so you've got to understand, it's not like you have to have done loads of research on them, but knowing a little bit about them and then mirroring. So you could do simple things like look up their company website, look up them and see what their public facing persona is. See what tidbits about themselves they've been willing to put on the internet in a public facing way and then mirror it. So if they shared that they have a pet, you share that you have a pet. If they have shared a couple of their hobbies, you can share a couple of your hobbies. So you're really matching them. If you feel uncomfortable with finding, like, what's the line, how personal, I don't know what part of myself is interesting and what part is like kind of niche. Although I think the more the better in terms of niche, that you never know what you're going to align with. But by using just a few minutes of research skills, you can know they think it's publicly appropriate to have shared that they have 3 kids and enjoy sailing on the weekend. And then you can say, well, I've never been sailing before, but I love spending time at the lake with my kids on the weekend. I find it really relaxing. And so now you've kind of met them at that same place. And so you can kind of feel safe in your exposure to that. The other thing is to just create a little blurb about yourself that you feel comfortable with, that doesn't overly expose but makes you a little humanized, and just stick with it. You know what I mean? It's almost like a memorized script. You don't have to change it every time. You tell a little bit about yourself, how you got to where you are, and usually one kind of like fun fact, so to speak, because it just makes you more human. And you can kind of almost make it seasonal, maybe. We're coming up
Mhm.
on fall and you're like, right now it's October. uh, my significant other loves this time of year, so my house right now smells like pumpkin spice, so it's so great to be here and get a breath of fresh air. Small things just make yourself feel more human and less robotic.
Mhm. So we establish a report with the other person. We get their trust by being open and sharing some things about us. How can we speak in an authoritarian way, in a way that is impactful?
So, in your question, are you asking like what's the actual physical way that we can talk that makes it more
Mm,
impactful?
what are some strategies, techniques that we can use to make our messages more impactful to others so they can hear these messages um, and give them attention, so not overlook these messages from us.
Yeah. So I think this kind of relates back to the core ideas of acting in terms of objective and storytelling elements, kind of going back to that idea of the narrative and our original roots in, you know, vocal and narrative storytelling as our form of expression. So, one key thing to do is to clarify what your objective is. And so, I think a lot of times we think we know our objective when going into something, but really isolating and crystallizing that for yourself. My goal at the end of this conversation, presentation, interaction is to, and then figure out it's really about what action do you want for them. So often people stop at, I want understanding, or I want, them to have a better awareness. But what we have to realize is lots of people have understanding and awareness about many things that doesn't drive towards action. So one of the best examples I can have is many people in our world understand and are aware of the dangers of cigarettes, and yet that may not stop their behavior if they engage in smoking cigarettes, because there's so many more factors into why people decide to smoke than just, oh, I'm not aware that that has some negative health effects in long-term use. So being aware of your objective, I want them to do this by the end. So when you are now changing your mindset towards an action oriented response from your, you know, audience, now what you need to do is create a presentation and a speaking style that's going to inspire them to act. And so we don't ever inspire anyone towards true action by like neutral tone. This doesn't matter. Whether you do this or not will have no effect on the outcome of anything. You need to have your vocal tones and your information drive this concept of, I need this action to happen, or I want this action to happen, and I'm going to talk in a way that gets you to buy in that this action should happen.
Yes, it's so this is a strategy, and we have to be in our minds. But if we have emotions, if the person who we are speaking is, I don't know, our leader, our boss, or an important person, how can we control our emotion and communicate in a way that is efficient without the other person seeing, or maybe seeing, but not so much? I don't know how much of our emotion can we let them see.
Right. I don't think that there's a bright line for that, because once again, knowing your audience, some people have very receptive bosses to emotional interactions. Some people may not. I think once again, returning to that idea that for so long we've under this adage of business isn't personal, compartmentalized, there shouldn't be emotion at play. One that's just so ridiculous and such a misunderstanding, and also I think leads to a ton of mental health problems within the business world the more we shove down, compartmentalize, and pretend that that is a reality that is even possible. But I think the other thing to come back to is that idea of objective. So within acting, one of the ways that you can build the character is through objective work. So what do I want in this situation? And then there's a thing called a super objective, which is what they kind of want over the whole play. And so within or movie, and within a 2 hour movie, this character can have kind of one super objective. I want respect, I want acceptance, I want love. Within our lives, I think there is some people that might argue that we each have one super objective that drives our behavior. I think that's a little bit limiting, but I do think within individual moments, we might have an emotional super objective that sometimes gets in the way of the moment to moment objective. So, for example, if you are talking to a superior and you want some sort of change because the current issue is hurting you in some way, it's emotionally impacting you, and so you need to speak to a superior about getting that changed, but you're hesitant because you think the superior or the company or whatever will be resistant to that change, or maybe it's just so emotionally charged that it's hard to bring up, all of these things.
Yeah.
Realizing, coming back to that idea of, I want to spur action. I want to have spur action, and being aware that as you're talking to them and they maybe give you a response that is starting to draw up those emotions that are tied to this issue, that asking yourself in the moment, is this like blocking my objective to have action, or is it a little bit right now triggering my need to be heard or my need for acceptance? And that's actually what's drawing up these emotions. It's really not about the thing I need in this moment. It's about that super objective, and that's being triggered a little bit. And then allowing yourself to kind of take a breath, and the more you do this, the better you can become at doing it in a moment and whatever, but just having that awareness, and then realizing there's nothing wrong with identifying feelings and emotions. What can be problematic is when you let the physicality of those feelings and emotions be so present that they're the driving factor, as opposed to the objective and the message. So identifying them out loud. Right now I'm starting to feel really frustrated and angry. And really, I'd love to get back to what we could do to make this better. But as sometimes, instead of voicing it, we shove it down because it should be in a box. It should not be personal. It should not be emotional. And then our body at some point can't shove anymore. And it all comes to the surface. So I would really encourage people to start to name those emotions, name those feelings, because there's absolutely nothing wrong with identifying them vocally, and stop shoving it down. And then all of a sudden, the physical manifestations of them are impossible to control. And now we are losing our way, because we, funny enough, tried to hide them.
So we can use our emotion to make our message more impactful, because maybe the other person doesn't know how we are feeling, and we have to tell them what is the problem, or what are some effects of that situation on us, and
Correct.
they can't know if we don't tell them.
100%. And it also opens up the opportunity for maybe them to vocalize too. I see that you're feeling frustrated. For me, this situation is a little bit frustrating too, and here is why. And then you two can work towards that super, or not that super objective, that primary objective in that moment of action. And what's unfortunate is we don't always get what we want, but you're never going to get there by saying, I'm just going to full steam ahead, because if I tell them all of this information, they'll be aware and then they'll absolutely do what I say. Quite frankly, that just isn't true in our world. You need to make
Mhm.
sure that you're following all the way through to actionable steps, and by making them buy in and feel that narrative world. And in movies and plays and all of that, emotion is what makes us buy in. So
And
there's absolutely
understand
nothing.
the other
Yeah,
person.
yeah,
Hmm.
they want that emotion when we watch our entertainment. So thinking that we shouldn't have it in this conversation, it just needs to be done in a controlled way to keep you safe as
Hmm.
well. It really is true. You shouldn't be putting yourself in this like emotionally vulnerable position where you're not in control. That's unhelpful for you as well.
Yes, and our emotion also are expressed through our body language. we use the nonverbal signals every time, and these are an important part of the communication. Um, how would you advise us to use body language to make our messages more impactful or more so we can communicate better?
And I think this all kind of comes back to that idea. There's kind of twofold of this, of the idea that we are our physical manifestation of our emotions is really what we're trying to avoid, as opposed to the emotion itself, or our uncontrolled physical manifestations, I should say. And so on the first part, being aware of how emotions physically manifest in your body. So knowing that when you get yourself into a situation that makes you anxious or tense, frustrated, what does your body do? How does your body signal that? And it's not that you can't allow that to happen, but once again, making sure that you're in control of it. Are you somebody that closes off, and you start to get really tight and closed off, and you signal that I'm not open to hearing how you feel about this? Are you somebody who starts to cry, and which makes you feel extra vulnerable? And just being aware of what those things, that they don't necessarily mean anything wrong, but that's your go to. And then you can be aware as it's happening that maybe you say, one moment, I'm just going to grab a glass of water and I'd love to keep going with this, so that you know those moments so that you can stay in control. And then on the other end of the spectrum, being aware of things like what your body language signals to other people. A really basic one, which people don't always realize, is hands. So, hands signal so much more than we think. Even if you don't use your hands often to talk, it almost signals more, because then in that isolated moment, your hands are saying so much. And this, once again, this is just generalities, but you have supinated, which means open palm hands, and you have pronated hands, which means they're facing down. An easy way to remember this is supinated, I'm hopefully holding a cup of soup. Pronated is the opposite. And so typically, when your hands are open, you are sending signals of, I'm open, I'm vulnerable, I'm accepting of what's happening here, I'm offering, the conversation to keep going. When you flip your hands over, a lot of times you are subtly signaling, I'm closed off, I'm trying to control the situation, I'm trying to assert my dominance in this situation. And so something as simple as making sure that you keep your hands open, both as the, like, maybe subordinate who's trying to get something from their boss, like, I'm here, I'm open, I'm vulnerable, but also when you're the superior and you're in a situation where maybe someone's questioning your authority or making you feel a little defensive. By keeping your hands open and your body language open, you are signaling to your um, maybe subordinates or your employees or whatever, that you are still open to hearing what they have to say and giving them that safe space to say it. Even if you might not at the end do what they want you to do, you have now indicated that they have that safe space with you. And that is just something as simple as which way your hands are going as you make gestures.
Interesting. So we can use our body language to make our messages more clear, and it's better to be aware of our own go-to expressions or gestures, and to control them if they are not help us to communicate efficiently.
Right. And like, once again, that's really audience specific. When, like, as I return to, if you have a manager, or you as a manager talking to your an employee, if you want to show that you're okay with emotion, maybe you do let some of those physical manifestations come through, but they shouldn't control you or the conversation. And in an opposite sense, if you know that once you kind of like tear the lid off them, you lose control of them, then taking that time to identify that's happening. I need to pause and regroup, and not just let these physical manifestations control. And I think what's hard is a lot of times because we're so connected, those physical manifestations start to drive that super objective of I'm not being heard, I'm not being accepted, I'm not being respected, and then we kind of keep signaling to our body, and our body is saying yep, 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 and then nope, I don't feel respected right now, and then we're like I'm not being respected right now, and it's just this back and forth loop, and we need to get ourselves out of that loop and return to the
Yes,
moment.
yes. Devin, thank you very much for sharing with us your knowledge. These are very helpful uh, information and tips for us. Uh, please tell us how can people learn more about you and about your work, and how can they reach you?
Oh, sure. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful to talk about it. I really enjoy kind of getting into the specifics of how we operate as humans because it's more interconnected than we think, and more
Yes,
like theater than we think. I own a communications company called Parlay Communicators, and so there's a website that they can go to. I'm also on LinkedIn under Devin Sarno. And then my team here in the States is George Washington Speech and Debate out of Denver, Colorado. And so all of these places, I have contact information, and I would love to work with anyone who is interested in getting a better handle or improving the way that they communicate, whether it be inside the workplace or client facing, because there is so much to be gained by investing in yourself and your presentation skills. And it's possible for anyone. There's not a single person out there, no matter how scary public speaking could be. I promise you, you can get a handle on it and you can be better at it. It's available to you.
wonderful. So I can become better at public speaking too.
Oh, 100%. Everybody can. It is something that we're all capable of doing.
Good news. Thank you very much, Devin. It was very nice to talk with you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.